نحمده ونصلي على رسول الكريم أما بعد السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. Jazakumullah khairan for joining again, mashallah. A few little technicalities. My not my personal battery, but my battery on my other phone wasn't charged, so I tried my utmost to charge it to the best it could possibly, inshallah. We live in hope. And my cable is not long enough to reach from the under the desk to the phone. So let's see what happens, inshallah. But anyway, alhamdulillah, here we are again. We have it's been very well received so far. These 1 hour short sessions of Fiqhour or Fiqhour, trying to sort of say the word fiqh, an hour all in one go, and spreading, mashallah, across the community, and people asking lots of questions. I thought it would be a nice, slow paced, but it's been coming in thick and fast. Let's see what today brings us, inshallah. So, please do start asking your questions as and when you wish. And I'm just going to touch upon a little point which I was asked to touch upon by a few ulama. And that was the sorts of things. In fact, it was quite coincidental, possibly, that 2 or 3 videos were shared with me today by different people, and it had like practices in it which were very alien to Islam, which have now unfortunately become sort of part of Islam. And now, without sort of naming individuals, there was certain individuals who were sort of trying to blow ta'weez through a microphone onto people. There was other people engaging in what looked like some form of dhikr, as that's the best I can explain it, in which there was sort of unusual sort of breathing methods. And also there was a couple of gentlemen, what looked like in the haram, and it looked like they were making wudu with thin air. So what happened, so the underlying issue with this sort of thing is that unfortunately, because we don't educate ourselves in matters of deen, and because we don't educate ourselves in matters of deen, then we can easily be fooled. Fooling a person is easy when they're ignorant. Fooling a person who is of intellect is and of ilm, not necessarily intellect, but who has ilm, is more difficult to fool. And therefore, we have to spend time in developing our ilm. The ilm is the important thing. Having a sound intellect is a useful resource. It doesn't necessarily mean that that useful resource will lead you to ilm. We know that there's many people on the surface of the earth that use their good intellect, but in other pursuits, in pursuits of worldly status and worldly acclaim and worldly fame, and instead of utilizing that knowledge to better themselves. So whenever you see something, then the first thing you've got to do is every one of us should have some kind of guide in our lives. We should always have somebody that we have as a point of call, whom we can engage with and whom we can discuss our matters with. Now, again, obviously, we don't necessarily want to kind of inundate them completely so that they have no time to anything else apart from literally answering our every moment whim as it comes. But rather, we're talking about the general sort of day-to-day practices about how you should be living your life. And if something looks alien to Islam, if something looks strange, then it should be questioned as strange. Nowadays we are sometimes beaten with the stick of compliance that we shouldn't question certain things. Now, there is adab and etiquette of questioning, but they should be matters which are raised and discussed. Khair, that aside, I wanted to start off with that particular short little introduction, as it was something that was requested by a few ulama to raise it as a point in which that we should be seeking practices which are masnoon, seeking practices which we find within the sunnah, not seeking practices which are alien to the deen and that were unfortunately brought in when various cultures were accepting Islam, Or it was seen as though we need to keep people in the deen. We need to draw people towards the deen. We need to bring people towards the deen. So if we do something a bit different, then they'll come. And this innovative approach of trying to be always on the edge and trying to bring people different, trying to engage with people in a different way, became something quite exciting. And you start to see it happening. We saw it also whenever something occurs. You'll also see various kind of reactions in the community towards that. The deen is very simple. The deen is very easy. The deen is not complicated. And the deen, we believe in the unseen, but we do not engage with matters of superstition. In fact, superstition was something in which the Prophet ﷺ used to challenge, so that the people would avoid superstitious behavior, avoid, like the way there is within Western culture, that if you go under a ladder, that it's bad luck. If you break a mirror, you have bad luck for 7 years, and these were all just superstitious matters. There was no real underlying issue. Allah SWT has made it quite clear on what matters will bring you good, khair, and what matters will bring you bad. The Prophet ﷺ has made it quite clear. So it's for us to find a reliable guide, find a reliable person that we trust, that we can engage with, and then as a consequence, we should follow their practices. That said, let's pick up. In the meantime, one question has come up here. Today it's been quiet on the Markaz al-Ifta wal Qadha questions, mashallah. Looks like we've dealt with everybody's pertinent and underlying problems. And as a result, today, there was no questions that came in through the Markaz al-Ifta wal Qadha. There is one question which has come up here. So today could be a relatively short session, alhamdulillah, which might be good for some of us, because some of us haven't eaten for most of the day. So maybe we can have an early meal. Khair, you never know, it might pick up as we go on. Can a person use a pen, calligraphy pen, to write the Arabic letters and ayats of the Quran if they don't know the ingredients used in the ink? Okay. Ingredients used in the ink. What kind of ingredients do we expect to be used in the ink? When it comes to ink are going to use ingredients which are pretty much going to be standard ingredients, and they don't use anything which would be of a nature that Muslims would not be able to engage with. There is a big push as well at the moment to move even our diets away from an omnivorous, particularly meat eating, carnivorous aspect of our diet, and move more towards plants and things of that nature. Why? Because so many things, many of the underlying diseases that we have, whether it be diabetes, whether it be anything to do with our cardiovascular, then it all stems upon the consumption of meat. And we touched upon this yesterday when we were talking about how much poultry and meat Muslims consume. And that's really the issue that we have, is because we eat too much meat. But also the cattle produce nearly twice or 3 times as much greenhouse gases than all the transportation on the planet. Would you believe? When I read that fact, I was quite amazed at that, how can that be? But it is. And so why are there so many animals on the earth? Reason why there's so many animals on the earth is because we like to eat animals. So you now have, we've had the industrial revolution. You now have what's called industrial farming. And that's why, in the Quran, it says that we should eat halal and tayyiba, that we should eat something which is both halal and tayyib. But if you look at the way we farm animals now, it is far from tayyib, far from tayyib. Even if you see caged hens, you'll find that they're in a very restricted, tiny space, and they do not see anything apart from that tiny space all their lives. Many of them, due to this kind of being stacked together, means that many of them die. Diseases spread quickly. They will, for example, with their talons and claws and their beaks, accidentally cut each other, and then there'll be an open wound which will get an infection, and then bacteria will spread. So there's so many diseases which is occurring because of this insatiable appetite that we have for poultry and meat. Okay. So, alhamdulillah, that deals with that. Just as I was about to say, please, if you have any more questions, put them up. And alhamdulillah, our dear sister has posed a question. So I would say again is that normally I don't need to ask pose questions because normally it's coming in thick and fast. But I think everybody's got Friday off. Maybe they've got plans. Everybody's gone out for Friday or something, or maybe they're reciting extra durud, which technically I know now is Saturday. So it may not get the same reward, but I'm sure there is reward in there for you. But let's see. Let's pick up this question. What is your opinion in regards to buying your first house on an interest-based mortgage? Someone has been told by ulama you are allowed for purchasing your first home. Please shed some light. So this question about interest, okay, the transaction, a usurious transaction, is problematic and has been considered as problematic amongst all the faiths of the book, Ahli Kitab. And it is something which was normalized by the Jewish community. And when it was normalized by the Jewish community, it was actually the Christian community that stood up against it, which is you find usually the Christian community doesn't have that much of an understanding of its legal apparatus. And that's being because obviously post in Europe, when the state and religion were separated, then you found that the religion became less of a legal system, but more of a moral system and more of an advisory system. So, but they stood up against usurious contracts. Islam, obviously, without doubt, stands up against usurious contracts. And the reason being is obvious. I've mentioned that in some of my lectures that I gave to RG Advisory when I was asked to speak about certain types of transactions. So I mentioned them in that place, in that time. If you have access to their various social media platforms, please do go to them and watch them. So because what a usurious transaction does is that a person who is in a state of need, so there's this person who can't afford to buy a house for £100,000. They cannot afford it. They're struggling to get together £100,000. So what they do is they approach a bank and they say to the bank, please give me £100,000 because I can't afford to get together £100,000 in order to buy a house. So the bank says, that's fine. We will give you £100,000, but on the premise that you give me £160,000 back. So you've already got this person who's already in a financial difficult situation, who's being taken advantage of, who's being exploited because of this person's difficult financial need, who's being exploited to say that I want to make money on you. I know you're poor, but I'm going to make money on you nonetheless. And so the bank that was already rich, or in the case, the shareholders behind the bank that was already rich, has now made another £60,000 off the back of this poor person who felt obliged to buy a house and obviously pay for that house and pay £100,000 for that house. So this exploitation is obviously seriously problematic. So the Sharia goes against this exploitation. It goes against this view that people should be exploited when they are in a difficult financial position. So, and this has now become the financial structure within the world. So we find now that these usurious transactions are the means by which transactions occur. And whether you've got Muslim majority countries, Malaysia, Indonesia, Pakistan, or you've got even minority countries like European, you will see that there will be element of usurious transactions which occur because it's how they fit into the bigger scheme of things. There is great effort with Islamic finance to try to avoid that. Very difficult. And we'll have a discussion about Islamic finance on another day. It's very difficult, but it tries its utmost to sort of go against what's there. But it's like a torrent. It's like a river flowing at speed. And then you've got this little sort of positioning that's trying to go against it. So when it comes to buying a house, or when it comes to a house, we're not required to buy a house. That's the first thing. Many people say, yes, but we need to buy a house because it's safer or there's less risk. Well, how is there less risk? Because if you buy a house and you get it on a mortgage and you can't pay your mortgages, then there's still a risk that you lose your house. So it's not that there's less risk. And then there's this argument, oh, yes, but if you buy a house and then the landlord can ask you to leave. He can kick you out, as I'm sure somebody who is watching will know how difficult it is to remove somebody from your property, tenants from your property. So it's easier said than done. In certain European countries, like Germany, for example, buying a property is something unheard of. They've been renting properties all the time. So, and it's similarly, when I was young, um, everybody bought cars. Nobody used to use taxis. You only used a taxi in absolute emergency. But now I see younger generations making a choice and choosing not to buy a car, but instead choosing to use taxis or cabs all the time. And we think, oh, but that's not good use of your money. Well, is it or isn't it? Because when you're buying a car, you having to buy the car, which is depreciating year by year. You're having to get car tax, you're having to get MOT, you're having to get insurance, you're having to get maintenance. So in a way, you could be spending easily, £3,000, £4,000, £5,000 easily annually on maintaining a car, when catching a cab might work out even cheaper for you when you don't have all those added costs, especially if you've got friends who can pick. So I think we need to sort of come out of that mindset about buying a house, or if it's your first house, you can get an interest-based mortgage. Because what that does, one is the transaction itself is impermissible. Secondly, those individuals and those people who try to provide Islamic finance, we are not supporting them. We should support them. I've unfortunately seen so many startups, Muslim startups, Islamic startups, who try to provide an Islamic product to the community, which is Sharia compliant, but the Muslim community don't get behind it. So when the Muslim community don't get behind it, what happens is that that product or that service disappears, because there was a similar thing that was done with regards to a payment processor. A lot of effort and energy and time and money went into making a Sharia compliant payment processor. But again, our community should be thriving at pushing towards that, to say, oh, you know what, let's get behind this, let's support this so that we have this payment processor. There are only exceptional circumstances where I would believe a mufti would give permissibility in somebody buying a property on an interest-based mortgage. A very rare occasion, and that would be, as I said, in extreme circumstances. And that, there's no point sharing that unusual circumstance on a platform which is accessible and open to the general public. Rather, it's probably better to share that privately with each individual, assessing their particular needs and assessing their particular situation, and make a decision based on that. But there may be people who might privately mention that, but this is not a general position to be given or is shared widely that is permissible, that we should engage in a usurious transaction in order to buy a house. Because then that opens up such a can of worms. Where do you stop? Riba is one of the very things in which Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has declared war against. It's and when it says war, how do you go to war against Allah? What does that even mean? What does that mean? It means that you have declared enmity. And why would a person declare enmity on such a matter? So it's changing our mindsets, is looking at things differently, and is trying to move people in that way, inshallah. And just as we came to the end of that question, Allah bless Mahdi, who's come in with a question here. Can I do business partnership for a halal business with a non-Muslim or a Muslim who has haram money? Okay, so this is an interesting question, in that a person wants to enter into some kind of partnership, and but the business is a halal business, but he's engaging with a non-Muslim or Muslim who has haram income. Now, if this is a request to fund this project, so basically the money is required. So both partners are expected to put in £1 million each, or £2 million each. And the Muslim obviously has got his 1 million or 2 million from halal sources. And the non-Muslim has brought his 1 million or 2 million from haram sources. So now, obviously, when this income is going in, when this investment is going in, now the ruling for a Muslim is quite clear that if this is a business partnership between a Muslim, two Muslims, and one is bringing haram money and one is using halal money, then obviously this is impermissible to engage in this particular transaction. Reason being is that, you know, the income that this person is bringing, which is the foundation of this business, is not sound. Okay, so one should avoid that altogether. Even though the Sharia does not apply to a non-Muslim, when we're bringing together a partnership and he's using income, so he's selling alcohol or he's doing this or that or the other, or he's engaged in poultry farming or whatever, and he's using that, then that's also something that should be avoided. The income that the business itself is generating, that's a different thing altogether, because that's being used in a halal business. So therefore, that itself is not a problem. But obviously, the finances which are being used, okay, that are being used to generate more funds, they are what are considered to be problematic. Can you elaborate on the rationale, as lots of people loophole? I heard that person was told it's halal. Meaning, as you said, some people get a personalized decision according to their personal circumstances and not to be published. Yes, this is something that we have to be very careful about. When we give, like, for example, this is called Fiqh Hour. So what we will discuss here is fiqh. Fiqh is generally applied. It's a general rule for everybody. So, you know, we all pray salah, we all fast, we all engage in these type of behaviors that applies to everybody and everybody. But when it comes to certain issues, when it comes to getting a fatwa from a mufti, then that fatwa that the mufti is giving is specific to this person's situation. It is not usually that this person should now broadcast this and says, oh, well, I've got this. And then the other person says, well, okay, I think my circumstances are the same as this person's circumstances. So because my circumstances are the same as this person's circumstances, I'm also going to apply that fatwa. That's not how it works. Okay, that's not how it works. So if somebody says, you know, like a general fiqh mas'ala, is it fard upon you to pray salah? Yes, it is fard upon you to pray salah. You can share that with anybody and everybody. This is not specific to you, it's specific to all the Muslim ummah. But if a person explains a particular scenario and says that, oh, you know, I have this issue where I have this, for example, I have this medical condition in which I'm always dripping urine. Do I need to perform wudu constantly? Because that's what happens. I make wudu, I'm literally about to pray my salah, and urine leaves my body. I then go, I clean myself, I make wudu, I stand to make salah, and urine leaves my body. So a mufti will give a fatwa to that person and says, you are ma'dhur. You come under the hukum of legally excused. And because you come under the hukum of legally excused, you will do this. So now this person shares this without giving all the details and says something like this: oh, I find it difficult to maintain my wudu. So this Mufti Saab, he has told me that I just have to do wudu at the beginning time and that's it. Now this other person thinks, oh, okay, I find it difficult to hold wudu. You know, every 15, 20 minutes, I need to go to the toilet. So I'll do the same as you, brother. What I'll do is at the start time, I will also make wudu. And now you see, good intentions, but now we have a problem. This person's circumstances were such that the mufti gave a fatwa based on this person's circumstances, and he may not necessarily have explained everything to them. This other person has now made an assumption that, oh, I also have, because he's not understood the illah, he's not understood the causative effect. What is the maqsad? What was the particular asal, the principle by which the ratio legis, what was the legal reasoning which the mufti performed in order to say to this person, this is for you, that you are now performing. You are not in a position to perform that. So what you need to do is you need to go and actually ask that question. You may say, oh, Mufti Sahab, I find it difficult to maintain my wudu. Why is that? Oh, I don't know. I drink a lot of water, or I've got diabetes, or whatever. So I need to go to the bathroom every half an hour, every 20 minutes. Can I just make wudu like my friend at the beginning of salah time and keep that same wudu throughout? No, you can't. Why not? You said he can. That's not fair. And then we get argumentative. It's not, the Mufti knows what's fair and what's not fair. That's why he's giving you this particular mas'ala. So we need to understand that. Whilst I'm on this, I remembered, since a question hasn't come up yet, I've remembered something which I was walking back from a dawat. It's always good to walk back from a dawat because you don't feel as guilty, because if you've eaten a little bit too much, you can burn the calories off on the way back. So I'm walking back with my cousin, and he said, look, Mufsad, the thing that I find a little bit concerning, he has opens, he speaks very openly in front of me. We've known each other for a long time. Well, he's my cousin, isn't he? So of course I've known him for a long time. So as he's walking home with me, he says one thing, and he uses these opportunities, alhamdulillah, may Allah bless him, to try to learn more ilm and ask questions. And, he says, I rarely get a chance to meet up with you, so I want to make the most of this. We could have walked, we could have got by car rather, or we chose to walk. So he says that one thing I find as a problem, if I can say that, I said, yeah, speak freely, is that he says that, a husband goes to a mufti, he explains the situation, and the mufti gives him a fatwa. So I said, yeah, fine. What's wrong with that? He says, yeah, but he's not heard the wife's side of things. He's not heard what's going, he's only heard one side of the story. He's only heard the husband coming back and saying, my wife does this, my wife. And I think the particular situation he was discussing was a husband went to a mufti and said that my wife does this, my wife does that, she doesn't do this, she doesn't do this. Would I be sinful if I give her divorce? And the mufti said that, no, you would not be sinful if you were to issue a divorce for her. So he says, well, that's not fair. And I said, why is it not fair? He says, well, he never heard the wife's side of things. He only heard one side of the story. What if that's all a lie? What if the wife says, I don't know what he's talking about. I do all of those things and I don't do any of those things that he said that I do. So I said, what you're confusing, my dear brother, is the difference between ifta and qada. So he says, what do you mean? I says, ifta and qada are two separate things. So he says, explain. I said, I will. Ifta is a scholar, a mufti, will give a answer based on the scenario that you have described. They're not saying what is right and what is wrong. They are saying, based on your description, this is the answer. Okay. So if you tell your doctor that I have this particular pain at the side of my, back, and every time I do this, it hurts and whatever, and you're doing a phone consultation, and when he does a phone consultation, and then he gives you some medicine, and you take that medicine, then isn't the doctor doing something wrong? Well, no, because he's going by he's diagnosing the situation based on your description. Now, if you've lied to him and the actual pain is in your eye and not in your lower back, and he's giving you something for your lower back, and then you complain that the doctor's got it wrong, well, why were you explaining that your pain is in your lower back if the pain was in your eye? So similarly, when a person goes to a mufti and explains that my wife does this, my wife does that, my wife does this, and she doesn't do this, and she doesn't do that, and she doesn't do this, is it permissible for me to give talaq to her? And the mufti says, yes, it's permissible based on that situation. When it comes to qada, the difference is now is trying to ascertain the truth. So if husband and wife say to a scholar who is trained as a qadi that please mediate between the two of us because we want to know who's right and who's wrong. So then the scholar will say, fine, please, brother, explain yourself. Who has got the accusation? Who is making the accusation? So one of them will put their hand up. I'm making the accusation. Okay, fine. What is your accusation that you're leveling at this person? So that person will say, my accusation is So it might be the wife complaining about the husband, or it might be the husband complaining about the wife. So you get the complainant to make the complaint. So that person will make a complaint. Okay, this is the issue, that's the issue, this is that issue. Okay, fine. Let's now turn to the other person. How do you plead to this complaint that this person has made? Do you agree with him or do you agree with her? And either that person will say, and the scholar will put the fear of Allah into them. And now this person will either say, yes, absolutely, whatever he said or she said is correct. Fine, easy decision to make. Or this person will say that, no, that's absolute nonsense. Okay, absolute nonsense. Because it's not like that. It's like this. And now he gives his version. Now, the scholar doesn't have knowledge of the unseen. In fact, the Prophet ﷺ, when these matters of this nature were brought to him, is not knowledge of the unseen. He could only go by, and he used to say that don't feel that you've achieved something great if you articulate your argument better and I judge in your favor. Don't think that's a good thing, that I judge in your favor, just because you can articulate the situation far better than your interlocutor who can't. And as a result, I judge in your favor. That's not a good thing for you. That's a bad thing for you. So then the scholar will say, any evidence? No, I've got evidence. Yes, there's some evidence for this. I've got witnesses. These two people were here when he said this. This was here, whatever. Now the scholar will try to gather as much evidence as he can, and he will then give a decision. What if he made the wrong decision? What if it was wrong? What if he decided in favor of the person who was lying? What if he didn't decide in favor of the person who was speaking the truth? Then he will still get reward, because he is applying the process of the sunnah, and this was the process of the sunnah. Obviously, reality or truth will be established in the court of Allah. So if somebody has been judged against, then they leave it to the court of Allah, which is not a good place for the person who's done wrong, because of the court of Allah, the punishment is greater. The punishment is greater. So therefore, he can have that resolved here. So that's the difference between giving a fatwa and giving a qadha, a decree, a judgment. Okay. Sam is here, mashallah. I often receive flyers from charities containing ayat, hadith, both in Arabic and English. What is the correct way to dispose of these respectfully? It is unfortunate that, charities, possibly due to their religious illiteracy, do write ayats, even if they are in English as well. Remember, we had this conversation, I think, on day one, possibly Sunday or Monday, last Sunday or this Monday that's just passed, about the verses of the Quran, even in English, that we should be giving them the same level of respect and honor as we would if they were written in Arabic. So it's unfortunate that charities use this. They shouldn't really use this. Why? Because, as is often the case, people don't want a pile of leaflets on their whatever shoe rack near the door, or some cabinet that they have, because at the end of the day, people don't like clutter. Now what happens is, first of all, it might be that the person who's delivering them is not really treating them with the correct adab. Also, when you throw something through the letterbox, it's falling on the floor, normally on a mat where people are cleaning their feet. So you find, with all things of this nature, that it is more sound, okay, to not include verses or even hadith. Just to say, explain in broad way that it is our understanding from the words of the Prophet and the verses of our book. Keep it generic like that we shouldn't do this or we shouldn't do that, and explain it in that way, rather than explaining it in the sense of having to quote hadith, having to quote verses of the Quran. So the sound way would be is to bury them or to place them in running water. So if you do have a garden or something around the back, that would be the best way, to just dig them and bury them in there. Other option would be is you could maybe soak them in water so the text is gone, and then you can discard the paper by burning. Burning is an option as well that has been given. We know, for example, Sayyidina Uthman radiallahu, when he gathered the mushafs that he wanted to remove, he burned them. So that is a possibility to use as well. Someone has recommended a book called Bahri Shariat for fiqh only. Would you concur? I do not know the text, so I've not read the text, so I cannot comment on that. What is the permissibility of consuming foods like beef, chicken, and other products made from them in non-Islamic countries? So I'm assuming what Mahdi is saying here is those that are not dhabiha, those that which have come from a non-dhabiha. Okay, if it is due to non-dhabiha, then we should avoid them. we cannot assume that because, using the understanding of the Ahli Kitab, that these are considered as Ahli Kitab, and then therefore we can eat them. Remember, within Christian faith now, there is no real method of slaughter. So this is just not a thing, basically. Everything is machine killed, and machine killed post-stunning in a certain way. So there is no slaughter method. The only slaughter method which remains is the Shakita method of the Jews. And that only remains. But it's very rare to find those. So technically, one may consume kosher meat. There is no harm in that. The position is acceptable. However, it is best to, especially when we see, Muslims forming a population in a non-Muslim country, is, establish those type of sort of premises. We saw that very early on here in the UK. In fact, Bradford was very famous for demanding halal school meals. In fact, Bradford's been very famous, alhamdulillah, for a lot of active Islamic activism, which is then from Bradford being pushed down to other cities where the Muslim community started to grow. So similarly, when it came to halal school meals, there was that approach to be taken as well. Are all the hadith in Mishkatul Masabih reliable? I guess it depends what you mean by reliable. They are sound, they are acceptable, if that's what you mean. They are not considered as matruk, if memory serves me well, but I can look into that for you and get back to you on tomorrow for that one, inshallah, so you can get a more detailed answer for that, Suleiman. Shredding. Oh, okay. Shredding for discarding religious material is no, I would not say shredding is. Because the words still remain on the text. The key thing here is the words on, not the words on the text on the material. The issue is the sanctity of the paper, for example, is established when you write the Quranic ayats on it. Okay, so that now this paper has now got that status. It will only lose that status when those words are removed from it. When you shred it, then the words are not removed from it. The words are still there. All you've done is just tore it up into such small pieces that it's ineligible to read. But that doesn't mean that the words have gone. The words are still there. So the issue is the words being written on the piece of paper or whatever material is being used to write on, like in days gone by, leaves, pieces of wood, things of that nature, inshallah. Okay, alaikum salam. It's good to see that Suhaib's here finally, mashallah. How would we carry on without you? But gladly you're here. So you need to be quick, Suhaib, if you're going to ask any questions, because we are running out of time. Is there any Sharia ruling on crowdfunding that I should be careful about? Okay, crowdfunding is a method by which people support a particular project. So let's just say whether it's a religious project, or a philanthropical project, you want to raise money for an orphanage, or you want to raise money to build a well, or you want to raise money for something in which you're giving back to the public. Or if the case is that you're trying to crowdfund to start a particular business off or something like that. So in that way, the normal method now obviously is that we have online, and when it is online, people will donate their money or give their money, which is a hadiyah. If you're rich, if you're using it for a person who is above nisab, then it's a hadiyah. And if you're using it for people below nisab, then it's sadaqah. So it's just a transfer of funds. And if it's going online, then that's usually okay. Obviously, you cannot be held responsible, and you cannot determine where that money's come from. You're just going to make an assumption that the money is fine. And then really is how you get that money to yourself, obviously you need to be, when you are crowdfunding, you need to be honest. You cannot say something on the information and do opposite to that. So if you're going to collect money for a well, then you should open a well. If you think you do not want to restrict yourself for a well because you don't know if it's going to be enough money for a well or just enough money for a water pump, then say that it will be for a water project, depending on the money that we raise. And if you only raise a few £100, then you might say, oh, okay, this is going to be a tube well, or this is going to be 2 water pumps. Or if you raise a couple of £1,000s, it will now be a water well. So at least if you keep that generic, then there's no harm in that either. Similarly, it shouldn't be done in a way where you're claiming that it's a philanthropical project, but really it's something which you're using to profit from, to make money from. Then again, there has to be honesty and clarity, because you're taking money from people. You're taking someone's money, and that's, whenever it comes to taking somebody's money, there has to be transparency, there has to be clarity. So there would be the main things that would be something that one needs to look at. If I fold my pants to make my foot naked, or fold my shalwar from the waist, will it fall in kafi sof? What does that even mean? What does kafi sof mean? I don't know what that means. Kaf sof, kafa sof. I don't know what that means. So if I fold my pants to make my foot naked, or fold my shalwar from the waist, will it fall in? Right. Well, you need to explain to me what that KAFESOF stands for, and then I'll be able to answer that. Jumping back onto here, what does that mean? What does cafe soft mean? Speak English, my man. I don't know what cafe soft means. Ruling or folding. Yeah, we see a lot of people who sort of fold their garments when they enter into salah. In fact, I see a lot of people do things. Okay, I see what you're saying. Right. No. You see a lot of people, this potentially, yes, it's potentially that. Okay, is that when you're talking about entering into salah, you see a lot of people do things which they don't do outside of salah. So for example, you'll see them put a hat on their head, but then as soon as they finish salah, they'll take the hat off their head. You'll see people fold the trousers at the bottom, and as soon as salah finishes, they'll unfold the trousers at the bottom. There are no extra regulations in salah that are not required outside of salah. I guess the only difference is to make sure that your shoulders are covered and your aura is covered, which I guess you can leave your shoulders uncovered if you're working in a field or something like that. So we need to get used to having our ankles uncovered, not just for salah. We should get used to, okay, it's entering low power mode. We should get used to having our head covered most of the time, because it's the sunnah, it's a masnoon. This is the Prophet al-Islam used to have his head covered, in the public, especially, virtually all the time. So we need to get those habits, not because what we do now is we made a lot of things specific to salah, so that we, in a way, we're saying Islam only applies to us when we're doing acts of worship. When we're not doing acts of worship, Islam doesn't apply. So we'll say, sometimes I've heard that sisters will cover their hair when azan starts. Not sure why that is. And when azan finishes, they'll uncover their hair again. You'll find that women won't look at a ghair mahram's face, in great detail when he's dead. And men won't look at a ghair mahram woman when she's dead, but they will look at one when she's alive. So you kind of scratch your head thinking, what's going on here? So Islam isn't just at religious times. Islam isn't just at religious events. Islam isn't just in religious venues. Islam is Islam all the time. Okay, Islam is Islam all the time, rather than just being Islam in these certain scenarios. Okay. Okay, so let's just pick up here now. Shredding, we've done that. Or permissible. When is it permissible for a Hanafi to take from another school? Okay, and this might be potentially the last question, unless we get another one in, because this is quite a detailed question. A Hanafi can't take from another school. Okay, a Hanafi has to adhere to his school. The other thing is even more high level than this, is most people are really just doing taqleed of a mufti. So let's be real here. A person can only consider himself to be Hanafi when he knows what Hanafi is. Most people do not know what Hanafi is. What they're saying is that I am muqallid to this mufti who follows the Hanafi school. Because each one of us, like I explained earlier, should be linking ourselves to a mufti, a sound mufti, a respectful mufti, a reputable mufti, and we should be following what he does. We ourselves are not Hanafi, because if I was to say to you that this is the Hanafi position, how would you know? If I was to say to you this is the Shafi position, how would you know? And if I was to say this is the Hanbali position, how would you know? If I gave you an answer and I didn't tell you and it was the Hanbali position, how would you know? So what my point that I'm making is that we have to rely on people who can access the kitabs. Okay, we have to rely on people who can access the kitabs, guiding us in our life, because we don't have the time or had the time to dedicate a significant portion of our life to study the kitabs. We just didn't have that. We were too busy in school. We were too busy in college. We were busy in uni. We were busy earning a living. We were busy, doing business. We were busy traveling. We were busy. So we just didn't have the time. So other people did that. So when they did that, now it's like it's like a famous. It reminds me of this joke. This person comes up to a scholar and he says, brother, can you tell me if music is haram? So he says, yeah, music is haram. So he goes, no, I don't want to take your word for it. He says, no. He says, no, I don't want to take your word for it. I want you to give me proof from the Quran that is haram. So he goes, yeah, but do you understand Quranic Arabic? He goes, no, I don't. So he goes, okay, so how, if I give you a verse of the Quran, how are you going to know what it means? He goes, oh, I'll ask you to translate it. So can you not see the paradox here? That the person himself does not know Quranic Arabic. He's asking a scholar a question, and then the scholar is giving him an answer, and he's saying, no, you need to prove it from the Quran, which he's going to ask the scholar then to translate for him. So that's the folly, isn't it? That's the folly. So really, in this case, when it comes to an average person, they are following a mufti. So if you are not following a mufti, you are going to be misguided, unfortunately, because who are you following then? And if you say, oh, I'm finding the answers to my questions by going on to Google, or I'm finding the answers to my questions by, going on to TikTok, or I'm finding the answers to my questions by just, seeing what people put up on their WhatsApp status, then he is your mufti. Because we're all taking our ilm from somebody. And if you're deciding that yourself, just by the way you feel, then you are your own mufti. Each one of us is doing that. So when it comes to the normal person, they are taking theirs from a mufti, and that's it. And they don't really know what he is, what he isn't. Now we get to the ulama. Then within the ulama, and there's grades within even the ulama, there are many ulama who unfortunately have studied but don't really understand what's kind of going on. So what they will have to do is they will have no choice but to follow senior ulama. Again, not really understanding whether he's giving him a Hanafi position or a Maliki position or Shafi position. He will just say that I follow Mufti Fala and I follow what he says to me. Khalas. Then we get to the higher level scholars now. So those high level scholars will be muqallid to, say, the Hanafi school. And they will follow the Hanafi school on matters. And that's it. They will not have capacity to decide on following another school. They will only follow the Hanafi school. That's it. Then you get the elite ulama. And those elite ulama will be giving us answers on contemporary matters, because they're on the actual cutting edge. So they're always researching. They're always giving us answers. We find ourselves in different financial circumstances, in different social circumstances, in different medical situations. So we need these elite ulama, the ones who are doing their ijtihad. Okay, the ones who are doing their research, who are doing tafaqquh, so that they can advise us in these circumstances. They may be in a position to say, okay, we are going to potentially look at that. But even then, it shouldn't be an isolated scholar saying, we're going to act on this position within the Maliki school or this position within the Shafi school. He should draw some kind of consensus. And when he draws some kind of consensus, then that position should be. So it's not as easy as a Hanafi deciding to take from another school. We've not really understood the whole concept of taqleed, and we've not really understood the concept of a madhab. When, say, Imam Ibn Abidin rahimahullah ta'ala or other fuqaha have discussed this, they're talking to the elite ulama. They're not talking to even the mediocre or middle ranking or lower ranking ulama. They're definitely not talking to the awam, because the awam are army, not army as in soldiers, but army with the ayn, meaning they don't even follow a madhab, because you can only follow a madhab if you understand a madhab. How can you follow a madhab if you don't understand a madhab? So that's something that we need to really, really understand. Can I give zakat to nephews who are studying at uni and don't have nisab of their own? Yes, that's absolutely fine. One can give zakat to nephews who are, I'm assuming, because they're studying at uni, they're obviously adults and they are fending for themselves and living on their own. If obviously they're living with their parents or their father's alive, then really the father should be supporting them. But if they're living alone, they have got their own residency, then in that case, in that circumstances, one can give their zakat to them. Khair, we're going to stop there, inshallah. I thought it was going to be a quiet Friday, but alhamdulillah, things picked up as time went on. So we didn't really get the break that I thought we would get. But inshallah, I hope and pray that you have found today's session as useful as others. Please do, as I keep saying, share with others. As I keep repeating, a service that we're providing here, inshallah, we will continue to do so as long as the public have a need for it, and as long as the public have an interest. When the public have no interest or no need for it, then inshallah there's other activities that we can preoccupy ourselves with. So the more people use it, the more people are aware of it, then inshallah the more we will continue. Bear in mind, inshallah, there is no holiday on Saturday, Sunday. We will, inshallah, all being well, be live again around 7 p.m. Today I had to make sure that this phone was charged up. We will be again live around 7 p.m. and inshallah also on Sunday when our whole week is complete. You may still post your questions on the Markuz al-Ifta wal Qada Telegram channel. We have one for the gents and we have one for the ladies, for the sisters. What that does at least is that it gives time to look at the questions during the day and also provide something to them. I don't know why people are ringing me on Facebook when they know I'm live. Ajib. Now that's as a result, it's knocked my Facebook off. Anyway, we're back. Khair, inshallah, on that note, wa akhiru da'wana and alhamdulillah rabbil alameen. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.